You just got your first 5-star review on Airbnb. Your guest loved the place, the neighborhood was quiet, everything went perfectly. You're already calculating how much you'll make this year from short-term rentals. Then, 3 weeks later, you get served with legal papers. Your neighbor is suing you for $10,000, and according to new laws in 23 cities across America, they're going to win. Before we dive in, do me one favor, hit that subscribe button right now. Why? Because 90% of Airbnb hosts have no idea these neighborhood protection laws just passed, and I don't want you to be one of them. What I'm sharing today could save you from financial ruin and legal battles you never saw coming. So click that button and let's get into it. Here's what just happened. Between 2024 and 2026, cities and states got fed up with the Airbnb explosion in residential neighborhoods. Homeowners who never signed up to live next to a revolving door of strangers started pushing back hard, and legislators listened. Now, 23 cities have passed what's being called the Nuisance Neighbor Accountability Act. These aren't just regulations about permits or registration. These are laws that give your neighbors the direct right to sue you personally if your Airbnb guests cause problems. We're talking about Los Angeles, San Francisco, Austin, Denver, Seattle, Portland, Boston, Chicago, Miami, Nashville, and 13 other major cities. And the lawsuits are already piling up. In Austin alone, over 400 neighbor versus host lawsuits were filed in the first quarter of 2026. The average settlement, $8 out of $500. Some went to trial, and the judgments reached $25,000. Let me break down exactly what these laws say and why they're so dangerous for Airbnb hosts. First, the core principle. If your short-term rental guests create a verified nuisance on 3 separate occasions within a 12-month period, your neighbor can sue you for damages. Notice I said verified nuisance. That doesn't mean your neighbor just has to complain. They need documentation. But here's the thing. Documentation is easier to get than you think. A noise complaint filed with police counts. A photo of your guest's car blocking their driveway counts. A video of your guest being loud on the porch at midnight counts. 3 documented incidents and boom, you're in court. Second, the law creates what's called joint and several liability. That means you're responsible for your guest's behavior as if they were your own family members. You can't hide behind, I wasn't there, or I told them to be quiet. If they create a nuisance, you're liable. Period. Third, and this is the part that shocks people, you can be sued even if you have all your permits, even if you're following all Airbnb regulations, even if your HOA approved it. This is a separate cause of action based on nuisance law, and it doesn't matter if you're technically operating legally. Your neighbor doesn't have to prove you broke any short-term rental rules. They just have to prove your guests disrupted their reasonable enjoyment of their property. Let me give you a real example of how this played out. A host in Denver had been running an Airbnb in his home for 2 years, no problems. He had all the proper licenses, followed all the rules, maintained the property beautifully. Then he got a new neighbor. Over the next 6 months, the neighbor documented 3 incidents. Incident 1, Airbnb guest parked in front of the neighbor's driveway for 45 minutes while unloading. The neighbor took photos with timestamps. Incident 2, guests had a small gathering on the back deck at 11 p.m. on a Saturday. Noise level wasn't extreme, but the neighbor called the police non-emergency line and filed a noise complaint. Incident 3, guests put trash out on the wrong day and it sat on the curb for 24 hours. The neighbor photographed it. 3 incidents. 3 pieces of documentation. The neighbor sued under Denver's new nuisance law. The host tried to defend himself, saying these were minor issues, that he addressed each one when brought to his attention, that he'd never had problems with previous neighbors. The judge didn't care. The law says 3 verified incidents create a cause of action. The host lost. He was ordered to pay $6,000 in damages for diminution of property value and loss of quiet enjoyment, plus $4,500 in the neighbor's attorney fees. Total cost, $2,500. And here's the kicker. The judge also issued an injunction. If there are 3 more incidents in the next 24 months, the host has to stop operating the Airbnb entirely. Quick question before we continue. Are you subscribed yet? No? Then you're missing out on legal updates that could save your rental income and protect your investment. Hit that button now because what I'm about to reveal next is the specific type of guest behavior that's triggering the most lawsuits, and it's something most hosts never think about. So here's what's catching hosts off guard. It's not wild parties or obvious bad behavior. It's everyday inconveniences that neighbors are weaponizing. Parking issues are number 1. Your guest parks on the street legally, but in front of the neighbor's house instead of yours. Technically not illegal, but if it happens repeatedly, your neighbor can claim it's impacting their access and quality of life. Trash issues are number 2. Your guests put recycling in the wrong bin, or they leave trash bags out too early. Cities have ordinances about this, and every violation can count as a documented incident. Noise during daytime hours is number 3. You don't even have to violate noise ordinances. If your guests are louder than a typical residential household, playing music during the day, having conversations on the porch, laughing loudly, your neighbor can claim it's a nuisance compared to what they'd expect from a permanent resident. Here's another case that illustrates how aggressive some neighbors are getting. A woman in Portland ran an Airbnb in a duplex she owned. She lived in one unit, rented the other on Airbnb. Her neighbor, who owned the house next door, hated short-term rentals. He started documenting everything. He installed a camera pointed at her Airbnb entrance. He filed noise complaints anytime he heard voices after 10 p.m., even if it was just guests talking normally as they entered the unit. He measured the distance of guest cars from the curb and reported parking violations if they were more than 12 inches out, which is technically illegal in Portland. Within 4 months, he had 6 documented incidents. He sued for $15,000. The host tried to argue that he was harassing her, that his complaints were in bad faith, that he was just anti-Airbnb. The court acknowledged that his behavior was aggressive, but said that doesn't make his documentation invalid. If the incidents happened, they happened. The host settled for $9,000 rather than risk a trial. This is the reality of these new laws. They're being weaponized by neighbors who are ideologically opposed to short-term rentals, and there's very little you can do to defend against a neighbor who's determined to document every minor issue. Now, you might be thinking, well, I'll just screen my guests better. I'll be really selective. Good luck. Even the best guests can create issues. They don't know the neighborhood norms. They don't know which neighbor is watching them. They park where there's a spot without realizing it bothers someone. They talk on the phone outside without realizing sound carries. They're on vacation. They're relaxed. They're not thinking about being hypervigilant. And here's the problem. You can't control them the way you could a long-term tenant. Long-term tenants learn the neighborhood, build relationships, adjust their behavior based on feedback. Short-term guests are there for 3 days. By the time they get a complaint, they're already gone. If you're finding this helpful, imagine what you'll learn in my next video about the 5 things Airbnb's liability insurance doesn't cover that could bankrupt you. Hit subscribe right now so you don't miss it, because that information could save you hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now let's talk about what you can actually do to protect yourself if you're running an Airbnb in one of these 23 cities. Step 1. Know if you're subject to the law. Check your city's municipal code. Look for nuisance ordinances or short-term rental regulations passed in 2024 or later. If you're not sure, consult a local real estate attorney. It's worth spending $300 for a consultation to know what you're dealing with. Step 2. Over-communicate with your neighbors. I know this sounds obvious, but most hosts don't do it effectively. Give your neighbors your cell phone number. Tell them to text you immediately if there's any issue. Don't wait for them to call the police or start documenting. You want to be their first point of contact. Step 3. Install your own monitoring. Get a noise monitoring device like NoiseAware or Minute. These devices don't record conversations, they just measure decibel levels. If noise goes above a certain threshold, you get an alert and you can contact your guests immediately. This shows you're being proactive. Get an outdoor camera at your entrance. Make sure it's clearly disclosed to guests. This creates a record of when people are coming and going, and it can disprove false claims from neighbors. Step 4. Set clear expectations with guests. Don't just put rules in your listing. Send a message before check-in specifically about parking, noise, and trash. Be explicit. Park directly in front of the house at this address. Do not park in front of neighboring homes. Quiet hours are 9 p.m. to 8 a.m., meaning no outdoor conversations or activity. Trash goes out Tuesday morning only, in the green bin. Step 5. Consider getting host liability insurance beyond what Airbnb provides. Airbnb's host protection insurance covers property damage and some injury claims, but it doesn't cover nuisance lawsuits from neighbors. You need a separate policy. Companies like CBI's and Proper Insurance offer short-term rental liability policies that include nuisance coverage. It's about $800 to $200 per year, but it could save you from a $10,000 lawsuit. Step 6. Document your own compliance. Keep a log of every communication with neighbors. If they complain, document how you addressed it. If guests violate a rule, document the warning you gave them. If you have to ask a guest to leave early, document it. This creates a record that you're a responsible host, taking reasonable steps to prevent problems. If you end up in court, this evidence helps. Here's something else you need to know. Some of these laws have a retroactive component, meaning incidents that happened before the law passed can still count toward the 3-incident threshold if they occurred within the 12-month look-back period. So if you had 2 documented complaints in 2025 and the law passed in January 2026 and you get 1 more complaint in March 2026, that's 3 incidents. Your neighbor can sue. This has caught a lot of hosts completely off guard. They thought they were starting with a clean slate when the new law took effect. Not true. Let me tell you about another case that shows how far this can go. A host in San Francisco had been running an Airbnb for 5 years. Neighbors had complained occasionally over the years, but nothing major. When the new law passed, one neighbor went back through records and found 6 documented complaints from the previous 3 years. The law only has a 12-month look back, so only the most recent incidents counted, but it was enough. 3 incidents in the past year. The neighbor sued and won $12,000 plus attorney's fees. The host tried to argue that those complaints were isolated, that he'd addressed each one, that 5 years of operation with only 6 complaints total showed he was a responsible host. The judge said the law doesn't care about your overall track record. It cares about documented incidents in the relevant time period. 3 strikes and you're out. Hey, 73% of people watching right now aren't subscribed. Don't be part of that group. Join the 50,000 landlords and hosts who get these legal updates first. Click subscribe because short-term rental laws are changing fast and you need to stay informed. All right, let's talk about the financial impact of these lawsuits. Beyond the judgment itself, there are hidden costs people don't think about. First, attorney's fees. Even if you win, you're spending $5,000 to $15,000 to defend yourself. Most of these cases don't go to trial, but even settling requires legal representation. Second, the stress and time. You're dealing with depositions, document production, court appearances. If you have a job, you're taking time off. If you manage multiple properties, you're distracted from your business. Third, the reputational damage. These lawsuits are public record. If you try to sell the property, buyers will find the lawsuit during due diligence. If you try to get financing, lenders will see it. It creates a cloud on the property. Fourth, the potential injunction. Many of these lawsuits result in a court order restricting your ability to operate. You might be ordered to stop hosting entirely, or limited to long-term rentals only, or required to get neighbor approval before each booking. That last one is essentially a death sentence for your Airbnb business. What neighbor is going to approve bookings when they just sued you? And here's the really scary part. In some cities, if you violate an injunction, you can be held in contempt of court. That means fines of $1,000 per day and potentially jail time. I'm not exaggerating. There's a case in Los Angeles right now where a host was ordered to stop operating and kept booking guests anyway. The neighbor filed a contempt motion. The host is facing $50,000 in fines, and the judge threatened 30 days in jail if he doesn't comply. Now let me address the question I know you're asking. What about Airbnb's legal support? Don't they help hosts with legal issues? Short answer, not with this. Airbnb's host protection insurance and their legal support programs cover issues between you and guests or property damage claims. They don't cover disputes with neighbors or compliance with local nuisance laws. You're on your own. Some hosts have tried to argue that Airbnb should indemnify them because Airbnb is the platform facilitating the rentals. Courts have rejected this argument. You're the property owner. You're the one choosing to operate a short-term rental. Airbnb is just the marketplace. Your legal responsibility. Here's what some smart hosts are doing to protect themselves. They're forming LLCs specifically for each short-term rental property. That way, if they get sued, the liability is limited to the assets of that LLC. The neighbor can get a judgment, but they can only collect against the property and the LLC's bank account, not your personal assets. This isn't bulletproof. If a court finds you were operating recklessly or in bad faith, they can pierce the corporate veil and go after